Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Sunday, March 13th, 2022, and today we're going to be taking a look at the state of Florida, one of the final states to confirm a congressional map, because there is a lot of drama and infighting on behalf of the Republican Party because of Governor Ron DeSantis' unwillingness to sign off on these new congressional maps. His reason being that he doesn't believe that these maps are fairly drawn, or more so that he believes they should be drawn more in favor of the GOP than they currently are. Many of these maps that have been proposed, and the most recent House proposal, and the one that was finalized on by the Florida House of Representatives, was a map that didn't change much. It maintained the status quo while adding an additional Republican seat. Now, knowing that the Republican Party has complete and total control over the redistricting process, many people expected an insane GOP gerrymander to come out of the state. It is a state with 31 electoral votes and thus 29 congressional districts, and it gave the Republican Party an out to counteract what the Democratic Party has done in many other states, which was gerrymander. And not to say that Republicans haven't done their fair share of gerrymandering, just at this point in time, what we are looking at is the Democratic Party coming ahead as a result of these old maps being proposed into new ones, and after Ohio is stricken down in just a few days, we should expect this to further expand the Democratic Party to about plus 12 Democratic-leaning seats. So, overall, what the Democratic Party is seeing from many of these states is that the country is moving further in the leftward direction. Even though 2022 is very much expected to be a red wave, you are looking at maps that give the Democratic Party more of an advantage than what they had back in 2020. So Ron DeSantis, knowing that Florida is one of those final states that can wait until June 13th, 2022, has pretty much pressured the Republican Party in the state of Florida to not finalize congressional districts and to put forth new proposals. In fact, he decided to take it on himself and put forth his own proposal. Now, it's very much unheard of for a governor to put forth their own congressional map. And the reason being, that's just something that you don't do. When you are the person who has to sign off on the finalized map as outlined in your state constitution by the state state Senate and the state House of Representatives, it is very weird to see a governor put forth and say, no, we're not doing that. Let's go ahead and use my proposal. And what his proposal was, gave the Republican Party 4 additional Republican-leaning seats. He gave the Democrats 8 Democratic-leaning seats, Republicans 18, and 2 highly competitive seats, which just so happened to be Republican-leaning, right? So looking at this map, what it would do is give Republicans 20 seats and the Democrats 9. Sorry, the Democrats get, there's 28 districts in total. I was wrong about the amount of districts that were added in. I always remembered how we expected Florida to gain 2. It ended up gaining 1. But the point being that what it would do is give us a 20-8 map, meaning in a normal year, Republicans would win 20 districts and the Democrats would win 8. And that gives them 71.4% in terms of total representation in a state that barely votes for the GOP by more than 55%, even in a wave year. So seeing all of that put together, it would be very strange to see a map that gives 71.4% representation to a party that barely wins the state pretty consistently. While Republicans do win, it's not monumental. This is not Wyoming. This is not a 71% type of state. And to give it such representation is just completely misrepresenting the voters in Washington, D.C. But honestly speaking, I think that is Ron DeSantis' goal. He knows that if he's able to make Florida a more Republican state, these 4 Republican-leaning seats adding in together can counteract much of the losses that Republicans haven't seen on the national level. Taking away 6 Republican-leaning seats from the old map, adding in 4 additional ones would only reduce that down to 2. And thus, it would reduce down the number of Democratic-leaning seats, putting us back to where we were relative to the 2020 House elections. But the Florida State Legislature and the State Senate said no. And they also pointed out the fact that Governor Ron DeSantis map is illegal. And why is it illegal? Because of the Voting Rights Act. The Voting Rights Act protects majority-minority districts and prevents them from not having a voice, prevents them from being restricted of their voice in Washington, D.C. And thus, the 5th congressional district, held by Representative Al Lawson, has been in place for quite some time. It takes in 2 major cities and draws a majority-minority district that Governor Ron DeSantis has actually argued not only is he not going to move forward with that map, but that he will veto any map that contains a 5th district, stating that this is unconstitutional, stating that this violates law. Even though every single person, Republican or Democrat, has told him that this does not violate law, in fact, is protected. And we'll talk about a bit about what the House of Representatives did in order to combat such rhetoric from Governor Ron DeSantis. But this is actually a fine district. Governor Ron DeSantis is completely wrong. In fact, he's probably just lying in an effort to draw out the map, because he knows that if it goes to the Florida Supreme Court, they will probably side with him, and then it will have to be taken a step further. And then it gives the Supreme Court on the national level an opportunity to hear a statewide case, reopen North Carolina, Ohio, because they heard the one from Florida. And then in addition to that, bring forth a case that has to deal with the Voting Rights Act. So looking at what he did, he drew out the 5th District and completely cracked it. He diluted minority interest, and he said this, in fact, is the constitutional way about doing it. Even though everybody, any political pundit, right-wing or left-wing, has agreed that he is wrong about that. In fact, the Florida House of Representatives has agreed that he was wrong. The Republican body has agreed that he was wrong. They have put forth maps that are, again, we will talk about in just a moment, but he cracked it. And he turned all of the other districts, he turned Charlie Crist's district into a solid GOP district, Trump plus 15 or higher, right? He turned the 15th district into a solid Trump district, 17th, solid Trump. 6th district, Stephanie Murphy, what was Democrat plus 5 is now Republican plus 14, a Donald Trump double-digit district. This is where things get tricky, right? This is where things begin to start to seem extremely wrong for Ron DeSantis to do. And that's why he has seen such major pushback from the state Senate and the state House of Representatives. They also are fearful from voters who voted in an amendment across the state, by a margin, I think 70-30, to get rid of gerrymandering and make it something that they cannot do as abiding by their state constitution. And I think that the Republican Party recognizes that. They recognize that the voters in Florida don't want a gerrymandered map. So they've put forth maps that are not changing the districts much and are actually putting forth somewhat of a fair plan. Looking at the House map, these are the two plans that they have put forth. One of them they meant to do to counteract Governor Ron DeSantis pushing back on a veto, which was drew the 5th District into an illegal map, still giving the Democrats the upper hand here. You're talking about nearly a Biden double-digit district here, but this is still a Democratic-leaning district. And they also drew a second map. That way, if the first map was to fail, the courts could choose the second map because it is practically, no change at all. All it does is change this 5th District from Democrat plus 16 and not carrying in, I believe, Tallahassee, or this other map that carries that in, keeps the majority-minority district, and abides by the Voting Rights Act, abides by the VRA. And seeing all of that, seeing the major consideration from the House of Representatives, it is very clear that they know that if Ron DeSantis does not approve of a map that does not carry a majority-minority district in the 5th District, that this will go to the courts and will likely be forced to draw a map, forced to draw a district that has a majority-minority representation. Ron DeSantis vowing to veto has now put us in a position where Florida will not go back to the state legislature. It will not go to Ron DeSantis. In fact, now it will be decided by a court because they are at a standstill. And now it needs to be decided by a higher position. And it is very likely that if the courts take this up and they decide to move forward with a non-gerrymandered map, we are going to see a map very similar to the one that the House of Representatives has put forth. And I reminded you that the House did not want to gerrymander this map, and truly they didn't. While Republicans do very much have the upper hand, it is just maintaining the status quo in Florida. And while the status quo in Florida can be argued that it is a gerrymander, and I do see that to an extent, I also do want to say that they did not go nearly as extreme as they could have. They did not go nearly as, anti-representative as they could be. Because this map represents minority interests, it represents Democratic interests in many ways, and it gives Democrats an opportunity to actually win a significant amount of congressional districts. Considering the fact that Republicans have a governor, a state legislature in full and total control without Democrats having any opportunity to prevent a congressional map from passing that, let's say the Republicans wanted to do, 27-1. Right? A gerrymandered map like that might actually survive a Governor Ron DeSantis appointed Supreme Court. And, while the same argument can be made that this map might not necessarily hold up, if they are to draw their own map on their own accord, they probably aren't going to go as substantially against the Democratic Party. It is much easier to uphold a map. It is much easier to say that the governor is correct than it is to draw your own map. And I also do want to say that the current position that we are in right now is the Republican Party, in all of their elected positions, have been trying to pass a map for months now, and Ron DeSantis has just been vehemently saying no. It is literally one man preventing the rest of the Republican-controlled state to proceed. The state legislative maps have been put forth and passed because that doesn't need the governor's signature. The state Senate maps have passed that doesn't need the governor's signature. But the congressional maps is what needs the governor's signature, and Ron DeSantis is still very much just holding up this entire process for no legitimate reason. The only reason being that he wants the maps to be more aggressive. Now, these maps don't necessarily favor the Democratic Party heavily. It's 15 Republican-leaning seats, 8 Democratic-leaning seats, and 5 highly competitive seats, which means that in a normal year, Republicans are winning 15, and Democrats potentially could win upwards of 13. And upwards of 13 isn't a lot. I think that, if we were talking about a super fair map, Democrats would have the opportunity to win the majority. But it's very reminiscent of what we saw in 2018 when the Democrats nearly won the majority in the state of Florida. And that's what this map was meant for. This map was meant to provide some type of competitiveness. But when Democrats drop the ball, Republicans win handedly. And that's exactly what this map would do. Sure, it's unfair, but it does give the Republican Party that sense of security while still giving Democrats a fair opportunity in the future. If anything, this is not nearly of an aggressive map as what we expected. The state Senate map failed. There were maps such as this that came along the line that did not add any additional Republican-leaning seats. It honestly would be bad politics to not add any additional Republican-leaning seats. Gerrymandering put aside, looking at the national overview, the Republican Party needs some wins. They aren't going to get it out of Florida with the current status because Ron DeSantis' map isn't going to go through. The House of Representatives map isn't going to go through. So now it goes to the courts, and we will see what the courts decide. It's very possible that they decide to draw an excessive gerrymander or not, right? And, if they're appointing someone who's a special master who they truly believe is going to be nonpartisan, it's going to become increasingly more difficult to see how a gerrymander is drawn. But altogether, what I want to point out is that I see Florida as the last shining star, shining a beacon of hope for the Republican Party to combat major efforts across the nation. But the state legislature is saying no. They are saying we are not going to go as extreme as Democrats have in New York. We are not going to go as extreme as Democrats have in California. We are going to play it somewhat fair. Republicans are always going to have the upper hand in Florida because they control the state, and that's exactly how they want it to go. But the rest of it, I think, much they are afraid of the voters, pushing back on them for gerrymandering, in addition to the fact that they just might see it as a moral issue. They might see it as an issue of not underrepresenting voters, not diluting minority interests. And that's something that you do have to applaud. While the Republican Party is probably extremely upset, at least national Republicans are probably looking at this and saying, what is wrong with you, right? Why are you not cracking Florida left and right? Why are you not turning it into the Republican New York? That's a question they'll have to ask. And that's a question that has already been resolved. The House of Representatives has said no. The state Senate has said no. They don't want to go aggressive, and the only person who does is Governor Ron DeSantis. Well, now we will see what happens in the state of Florida. It's a lot of drama for something that is going to be extremely important on the national level. I think it definitely deserves a lot of attention, deserves probably a lot of this drama, but it is unfortunate to see that one of the largest states in the country can't even solidify a new congressional map, not because of Democrat versus Republican polarization or Democrat versus Republican fighting, but because of infighting within a singular political party that has complete and total control how this process goes. I think what we will find is that we are going to end up with a map that is similar to the old one, not necessarily a least change proposal as what we're thinking, but potentially a map where Democrats still are going to be not in the upper hand by any means, but still in an opportunity to win a significant amount of the state's congressional districts. Looking at the Ron DeSantis map, I don't think that is the likeliest outcome as a result of this. Moving to an impasse means that it is going to go to the courts. And, looking at his map, a lot of it would be unfair and truly unconstitutional, breaking the VRA. And looking at the map here, what we were finding is that many of these districts are pretty much shoring up Democratic votes and completely cutting them out of opportunities in other districts. The 26th district also was in a position where it was all the way, I guess it was the redrawn 25th district, so I guess it's pushing down an additional district. The 27th becomes the 26th, becomes the 27th, the 27th becomes the 28th. I'm just looking around here to see if there's really any opportunities for Democrats to win. It doesn't seem so. It seems Democrats really only have the opportunity in the Miami-Dade area, and beyond that, it's a lost cause. In fact, Democrats could potentially lose the 20th district in a red wave, could potentially lose the 25th district in a red wave, which would give Democrats, in the worst case, 6 districts out of a state with 28 congressional districts. At least in the other maps, Democrats still have opportunities, and their Democratic-leaning seats aren't as close as they are in the Ron DeSantis map. And Republicans still have a significant amount of states that could be seats that could be taken away from them, right? They still hold on to the 27th to 28th. Democrats could win there. They could also win in the 15th. They could also win in the 14th, hold on there, hold on in the 13th, potentially hold on to the 7th district, depending on the new maps. A lot of it does come down to the Democratic Party's national environment, what they're doing on the national level. 2018 was obviously a better year for Democrats than 2020 was, and that is reflected in Florida. Much better year than I would say in 2016. The Republicans did have a different map. The state of Florida had a different map back in 2014. Looking at it, I believe, actually, that's interesting to see. Gwen Graham was able to win in this district. I believe there was a discussion about that, but then it soon was lost later down the line. But looking at the difference here, 2014 map was thrown out because it was unfair. 2016 was put in place to make it a fair map, and Republicans lost a district and Democrats gained one. 2018 comes around, Democrats nearly gain all of them. They don't really come within striking distance in many of these other competitive districts. The Democrats just simply win all of the ones that they need to. They're winning in all of these, solid districts by a significant amount. In fact, very interesting to see how some of them go from very solid Democratic districts to being more competitive in 2020, and will be in 2022. All around here, I think we are going to end up with a map that Democrats aren't going to be super happy with in Florida, but it's not going to be the way that we saw New York go to the Democrats, Illinois go to the Democrats, Ohio go to the Republicans, original North Carolina map go to the Republicans. I don't think that it's what we should expect from the state of Florida. Of course, it's not up to me. I'm not the one drawing these maps, so time will tell. But right now, this is all coming down to an infight between the GOP, between Ron DeSantis and the state legislature, and it is going to be a wild ride to see what is actually put out by the courts in Florida. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 House election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.